Good morning. How are you? I am Jenny Keffer. I am a PCOS fertility specialist and a certified AIP coach. All of that's just a fancy way of saying that I help women with PCOS get pregnant naturally. Thanks so much today for joining me. I want to talk a little bit today about what causes PCOS. A lot of confusion around what causes PCOS and what doesn't cause PCOS. So it can go either way. One of the things that I like to talk about with my clients is let's look at three main factors that play into the development of PCOS. Number one is going to be genetics. It is believed that there's a genetic component to PCOS. We do tend to see that if there's one family member or someone that has PCOS, it does seem to make it a little bit more common that another family member would have PCOS. So that is suggestive that there is a genetic component to it. Luckily, that's not all of the picture. So there are other things that play into it. So one is genetics, two is environment. These are things that perhaps you're being exposed to in your environment, and that is something to think about because it might be something that you may be able to have a little bit of control over, which is great. The third thing that plays into causing PCOS is going to be diet and lifestyle. And a lot of times my clients are like, oh no, does this mean that there's something that I'm doing that's causing PCOS? And I always say not necessarily. You know, we are not robots. We are individuals and our bodies function well in different ways. So something that might be completely fine for one woman would not necessarily be completely fine for another woman. So it's really looking at what your life looks like, how your days look, how you live. And that's one of the things that I always talk about with my clients is how are you living your life? What do you eat? How do you move? How do you live? How do you live your life? And those things a lot of times will give us some clues to things that we might be able to change in order to help your body to get pregnant. And one of the most exciting things about that is that that's something that you have control over. So you definitely don't have control over your genetic makeup and what might turn on that PCOS switch, but you do have control somewhat over your environment, and you also have control over lifestyle and your diet. So that's a huge, huge win for you. If you have PCOS, you're trying to get pregnant, there's certain things that we can do that are going to help make that process a little bit smoother for you. And the good news is there's lots of things that we can do naturally that are going to help that process along. So if you're trying to get pregnant with PCOS, there's definitely hope that that's going to happen. Now, one of the things that I would like to encourage you to do is to make sure that you have PCOS. If you have not received a diagnosis, I encourage you to find a doctor that you trust and discuss some of the symptoms that you might be having. Some common symptoms of PCOS are acne, irregular periods, anovulation, which just means that you're not ovulating, heavier than normal periods. When you do have them, it seems like you're bleeding a lot. Also, male pattern hair growth, which means you might be growing hair on your chest, you might be growing hair on your chin or your cheeks. Also, male pattern hair loss. Someone are losing hair from the top of their head. That's another feature that can be a symptom of PCOS. Also, other things that are symptomatic would be insulin resistance, which you'll hear me talk a lot about insulin resistance, because this is one of the things that insulin resistance is going to create a lot of the symptoms of PCOS. So I talk a lot about insulin resistance and how that is playing into PCOS and playing into creating and continuing a lot of the symptoms of PCOS. So those are some of the things that women with PCOS experience. Another thing that is common, but it is definitely not always the case. Some women with PCOS have male pattern weight gain, and this you would see a lot of weight gain around the middle, and that is something that's common. But again, that's not always the case. So it's really important that we make sure that we find a doctor that we trust and we get that diagnosis, because some doctors even some doctors still believe that if a woman has PCOS, it automatically assumes she's obese. And this is not the case. I've seen women who are underweight, and I've seen a lot of women who are at a normal weight. So it's really important to make sure that your doctor is well versed in PCOS, that he's looking at the right things, and that he's looking at the full picture. In order to be diagnosed with PCOS, your doctor is going to look at three things. One, he's going to look at, are you ovulating? So are you ovulating? Are you having regular periods? Are definitely an indicator that you're ovulating. If you're having irregular periods, it's likely that you're not ovulating. If you're not ovulating, you're not going to be able to get pregnant. So not ovulating is one symptom. Another symptom is that you have elevated androgen levels. Androgens are testosterone. A lot of times we think testosterone and we immediately think, well, don't men have testosterone, not women? Women actually, even healthy women, have a certain level of testosterone, a certain level of male androgens. Testosterone is one androgen. So it's definitely not the only one, but it's the one that most people are familiar with. So women with PCOS may have elevated androgen levels. So they may have elevated male hormones. And another thing that would be the third criteria for diagnosis is that you have cysts on your ovaries. Now, this is not necessarily a symptom for all women. Some women do not have cysts on their ovaries. So it's really important that your doctor is well educated in diagnosing PCOS. Again, you're going to need two of the three, not ovulating, elevated androgen levels, and cysts on the ovaries. 2 out of those 3 is what the criteria would be for diagnosing PCOS. And you'll notice none of those 3 says she's obese or she's overweight. So that being overweight is not a diagnostic criteria for you having PCOS. So it's really important we find a good doctor, make sure you get that diagnosis. The last thing that I just want to address, and if you follow me, you've heard me say this before, but I do want to make sure that we touch base and say, you did not cause this. You didn't cause yourself to get PCOS, and I don't want you to put yourself in a position where you're focusing on that. Certainly with any disease or any disorder, it's very common that we think, well, is there something that I did? Do I deserve this? And the answer is absolutely not. And I think that, again, sometimes we have really well-meaning friends and family who try to make a lot of helpful suggestions about what we should and should not do. And it's not necessarily anything that you have control over. So we have to look at what's going on, look at the root cause. That's what I like to do. I love definitely a person who loves science-based solutions. And that's what my program is. It's a 12-week program that is based in science. We're looking and making changes and targeted changes in our diet and our lifestyle that are supported by science. And rather than looking at myths and maybe this, maybe that, we want to definitely always look at the facts and look at what is scientifically supported. But definitely, as far as causative factors, there's not one thing. We're never going to get to just one thing we can point our finger and say, hey, that's the cause of PCOS. Likely there's multiple causes of PCOS, and it's different for each woman. And that's why that you have a very unique approach to how you're dealing with your PCOS and how you're treating it. It's really important especially if you're looking at doing things naturally, that you have a broad approach to what may or may not work for you. Thank you so much. I'm glad that we had this time today, and I look forward to hearing from you, talking to you more about things that you can do to get pregnant with PCOS. If you'd like to visit my website, you can do so. It is www.mypcospregnancy.com, and we can definitely, you can get some more resources there, find a little bit more information as you continue on this journey to motherhood.